Welcome to Adulting on the Spectrum. I am Andrew, an autistic certified financial planner. I co-run Adulting on the Spectrum with Eileen Lamb. Hey, Eileen.
Hey, everyone. In this podcast, we want to highlight the real voices of autistic adults, not just inspirational stories, but people like us talking about their day-to-day life. Basically, we want to give a voice to a variety of autistic people.
Today, our guest is Erin Burnett. Erin is a 23-year-old autistic woman from Northern Ireland, diagnosed at 18. She is the author of 2 books, a fantasy novel for children, and a nonfiction book about autism and the church.
Hey, Erin, thank you for joining us today. I know it's late for you, so we're happy you could make it. We want to start by asking you what identity language you use. And I'm talking about pronouns, but also a person with autism, autistic person. What's your preference?
With pronouns, she, her. And when it comes to identity language, I honestly use them both interchangeably. I really don't mind. So either is okay with me.
Awesome. Same with us.
Except Audie. I really don't like Audie, the slang. I think that's the only one. And I don't have a good reason for it. Like, I won't correct anyone for using it.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. I see it in writing in groups. Yeah.
It's like a shortcut, like almost like slang, kind of like internet. I don't know why. I have no reason. But anyway. So, Erin, you were diagnosed at 18. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like, what changed in your life, what didn't?
So I was diagnosed in my final year of high school after goodness, many years of just had a terrible time in school in general. For a reason I couldn't articulate, I just couldn't make friends with people my age. But academically, I was fine. So I don't think my problems were picked up as early as they could be because my academics were fine, but socially it wasn't great, which of course then wasn't good for my general mental health and self-esteem, which is how I ended up seeing a counsellor. And it was that counsellor who then recognized the signs of autism in me. And I'm very grateful to her for this. And she then referred me on for a diagnosis. However, in the UK, the waiting list for an adult diagnosis, I think it was about 3 years. It was crazy. So I was really, really fortunate that as a family, we were able to afford a private assessment immediately, whereas I know most people wouldn't be able to do that and would be stuck waiting 3 years. So I was really fortunate in that regard. And yeah, the assessment, I actually went through a child assessment, even though I was 18, because I'd literally just turned 18. So, and I found it very helpful. It was just an opportunity to talk basically about myself, my experiences, what I found difficult. And at the end of the assessment, which I think was about 4 hours in all over different sessions, we came to the conclusion that, well, back then we still called it Asperger's. I think we still use Asperger's in a certain part of the world. In other parts of the world, it's gone out of favor, but that's what they said I had, Asperger's or autism. And for me, it was a really good experience because up until that point, all I knew about autism was the stereotype that it was young boys, and that was it. I never really considered that could have been the reason why I was struggling so much. So it was really good for me because it helped me understand myself, that it wasn't my fault. It was also quite good timing because I was just about to go to university, which meant then support could be put in place by the university. And I had a really nice support worker. In fact, I still have a support worker who meets me once a week. And yeah, it was very positive and things just got a lot better from there.
And can you tell us a bit more about your experience with Christianity and how was that impacted, like before and after your diagnosis? Anything changed?
So in Northern Ireland, where I'm from, like religion and the church, it's very much part of the culture. I think we have the highest church attendance in Western Europe last time I checked. So even if someone doesn't personally believe, it's still just part of the culture. So I've always grown up going to church and Christian events. And it was actually really helpful for me, particularly at the time when I was really struggling at school, because I think it's the case for a lot of autistic people. We tend to get on better with people who are older or younger than us rather than our peers. And the church was a multi-generational community. So that was actually really helpful for me in that time. After my diagnosis, I think I was able to recognize certain negative tendencies in myself when it came to faith and work on it. So, for example, I used to take everything extremely literally, which is a very autistic thing to do. But unfortunately, that meant I became quite, I suppose you would say, judgmental towards others because I was taking it all so literally. But, you know, once I got my diagnosis and I understood myself a bit more and I read into things more, yeah, I think it just helped me become a bit more chill.
Was the church accepting of your diagnosis?
It was, yeah. I think for a lot of people, in fact, for most people, it was the first time they'd ever seen like an adult with autism. And I think I got quite a lot of the, you know, you don't look autistic, just well-meaning, but
yeah, I think we've all heard it. Yeah.
But they were generally supportive. I never came across the sort of some of the horror stories you read online, people like being exorcised of demons or whatever. No, there was none of that.
Good, yeah. I've read those horrific, not long ago too, you know, like you would think that's something from the past, but no. Yeah. It was, it went viral on Twitter, I think, like a pastor that was trying to exorcise autistic children or something. Like, I'm glad it wasn't your experience.
Can you tell us what you think the church either, you know, doesn't get right? And again, either anything regards to, you know, you or, and then what, you know, do they, you know, get right?
So, well, we already mentioned, you know, the really extreme cases that are thankfully rare, but it still shouldn't happen. You know, that autism is seen as demon possession or something ridiculous like that. That's obviously really not helpful for anyone involved. There's also, I suppose, things that apply really to any mass gathering. There can be a lot of sensory overload, particularly in the very modern churches that are more like concert halls. It can be really, really difficult. Like I remember going to like a really modern church and I just had to leave quite soon because it was so loud. There was like strobe lights. It was, yeah. But of course, that doesn't mean they have to fundamentally change the way they do things, because that's good for a lot of people. They just need to recognize, oh, for some people, this mightn't be the best. And there are certain things they can put in place to make it better, quite simple things. So, you know, you could give out earplugs, or if it really is so loud that you can't be in the main hall, what some churches do is that they have a quiet room where they broadcast it, which can be much nicer. So there's ways of getting around it.
So out of all the religions out there, which one do you think is the most inclusive to autistic people?
I think, particularly when it comes to freedom of thought, I think the Unitarian Universalists, they tend to be the most accepting of different ways of thinking, and there's a big emphasis on finding a path that works for you rather than a path that's been imposed on you by someone else. So yeah, I think if an autistic person had never been to a religious organization before and was thinking of where to go, probably the UU would be a good place to start. Also the Quakers. The Quakers are slightly more like overtly Christian, but they still have, you know, a lot of emphasis on free thought and diversity. So traditions like that.
So you talked about what what the church gets right, and some of the extreme cases of what they get wrong. Is there anything else you think they get wrong, like in the least extreme way?
it's not necessarily wrong, but particularly in like Protestant circles, there's a big emphasis on personal relationship with Jesus or personal relationship with God. And I think I speak for a lot of autistic people, and the research backs this up as well. Autistic people don't tend to think in a supernatural way, at least in comparison to neurotypicals. So for me, I found that sort of language of personal relationship with Jesus not particularly helpful for me. I preferred to look at other ways. So for example, I see it as a very practical thing. You know, I want to live like Jesus, follow his teachings, but I don't necessarily have that same real supernatural element to it that a lot of neurotypicals would have. And I think the church just needs to acknowledge that that can be, you know, it can be tricky for autistic people. We can't help the way we think, and just helping us to creatively think of ways that we can still engage with our faith communities, but in a way that fits the way we think.
Makes sense. I heard that you were canceled, for lack of a better word, for using a person first language. What happened?
It was a funny experience. So after I first got diagnosed, and I did a bit of research on it when I was at university, I started publishing a few articles on different websites and just talking about autism, the church, my experience. I was blissfully unaware of all the divides in the online autism community until one of my articles ended up getting pulled. So it was published and then unpublished, and I think I emailed them and it was like, what's going on? And yeah, amongst a whole lot of other reasons, one of the things was, yeah, people had complained because I used first language. I hadn't used all the most up-to-date terminology. They disagreed with some of the opinions I had about autism. But I was thinking, you know, that's my experience. You're perfectly entitled to disagree with me and present your other experience. But no, I think the online autism community, it's not accepting enough of different views, which can be quite challenging.
Yeah, it's very, very true, unfortunately. Who published it and then unpublished it? Like, that's crazy. Like you said, it's like, it's an opinion piece. You're sharing your side, you know, your story. It's not like you're speaking on behalf of the entire community. So I don't understand why they would like unpublish it because you use what they think is the wrong language. Was that like a university website or what was it?
No, it was a church group, and you know, I won't name them because overall they do very good work. They're about disability in the church. But I think their argument was, you know, we can't publish anything that's going to upset people. I was like, okay, fine.
Wow.
But
so the church was aware of those things, though. I mean, that's pretty surprising. I feel like the fact that they knew that this would be controversial.
I think it's only in quite niche, you know, like disability activism circles within the church. I think as a whole, it's not quite as divided.
Damn.
Do you have a resource for when somebody, you know, might feel, you know, excluded from their faith community, where they should, you know, go, or what they should do? Like, for example, you mentioned Protestant, right? And that, you know, a lot of what they encourage may not be aligned, or just other forms of exclusion, somebody who resources where they could go.
Yeah, so of course it will depend on location, but in the UK we have an organisation called Inclusive Church, which, as the name suggests, is all about making the church inclusive for, well, disability is one of their categories, but also for many other categories like race, sexuality, gender, etc. So an organisation like that, which has loads of articles and books, can be a really helpful place to start. In America, there's an organisation called the Autism Faith Network, which was founded by, I think, a mother of autistic sons, I think. And like, they're really good at just thinking of practical ways that churches can be more inclusive of neurodiversity. So there's people out there providing resources.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
On that topic, how do you think Christian teaching, people about tolerance can help the autism community with its divide?
Yeah, so much of the New Testament is parables and stories about tolerance and accepting of difference. So, for example, there's the famous parable of the Good Samaritan, so the Samaritans were the religious group that no one really liked, but in the story, it was the Samaritan who was better than everyone. And a lot of these stories are just about challenging our perceptions. There's also parts of the New Testament that deal with some of the very first churches, and just like any organization made up of humans, there were loads of disagreements, loads of infighting, everyone was falling out. And what the New Testament authors try to do is to encourage them to think what we have in common. In a Christian sense, what we have in common is that we want to follow Christ. All these other disagreements are just getting in the way of our true mission. So I think I would say, particularly with the autism thing, everyone is very much entitled to their own views. They should be referred to however they want. They can think about autism however they want. But at the same time, the church should be a safe space where conflicting views can coexist. And I think that also applies for parents, because you all know this. Parents get dreadful pushback whenever they talk about how hard it is to raise autistic children. That doesn't mean they don't like their children, of course not. They're just acknowledging how hard it is. And sometimes they can get horrible comments online like, oh, you're a bad parent, etc. I would really hope that the church, if it is going to be a caring community, would be able to accept these people, accept their challenges, and not criticize them.
And let's hope that maybe the autism community can get there as well. But that sounds a little, I count on an organization that's been around for, a few thousand years changing before the autism community at this point. So one thing that I have read, and I have no studies to back this up in anything beyond my own personal belief or experience, is that and I'm using the term majority, knowing that I'm not pretending, not in the majority as a fact, just my understanding is that are atheist or agnostic, the majority of autistics. Is that true? I am, so the majority in my current room, and that could just be the people I'm around anyway. Is that true? And if so, why do you think that is, or higher than average % of the population?
No, it definitely is true. Yeah, I did some research on it while I was at university because I found it really interesting. And there's multiple papers that demonstrate that, autistic people are more likely to be atheist or agnostic. And the reasons for that, a big reason is that we tend to think more empirically. And by that, I mean, things we can experience. We don't tend to engage in what's called teleological thinking, which just means seeing some sort of grand purpose to everything. We are more likely just to see things as they are and not necessarily ascribe a higher purpose to anything. It just is what it is. It happens because it happens. That sort of view tends to be more common. Yes, the one reason was that as a whole, they don't tend to look for some sort of overarching purpose compared to neurotypicals. Autistic people have also been demonstrated to have less of what we call sensus divinitatis, and that just means, a sense of something supernatural. Neurotypicals talk about this quite a lot. They talk about, well, in a Christian sense, having a relationship with Jesus, or even in other religions or no religion, there's still lots of talk of just general spirituality, which for a lot of autistic people, they just can't relate to. And of course, it's not everyone. I know many autistic people in the church who have absolutely no problem with believing in everything supernatural. But for a lot of us, yeah, we just don't naturally think that way. We tend to be more logical, empirical, and that can prevent us from, believing in, some of the supernatural aspects of the Bible. So in my research, I wanted to think, okay, so it is what it is. There's no point in forcing someone to try and think in a way that they just can't. I tried to do that for a long time. I felt like a terrible Christian, but instead, I think what the church needs to do is just accept that this is how some people think, but they still have a lot to offer the church. Like I was saying, a lot of faith comes down to, it's more about what you do than what you believe, some of it. So, and this applies to Christianity, but it also applies to a lot of religion. It's all about tolerance, trying to follow the example of Jesus, also living in community. There's a lot of good things that can be gained from being part of a religious community, even if you struggle with the supernatural elements, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. That was my thinking when Andrew asked the question, was that autistic people are more like down to earth, logical.
Yeah.
And it just makes a lot of sense. I'd be curious to read actual studies and on the numbers.
So for
Eileen,
example,
that'd be a great transition to asking about her book, by the way, which was your next question. But
I know
you screwed that up. So,
but I'm really interested in this, so I'm going to ask questions.
Go.
I was going to ask. So, for example, just to give an example of how we could maybe look at things. So, take a Bible story like, I don't know, Adam and Eve in the garden. Some people believe that is literal fact and it happened. Okay. Others, like me, might struggle with it because, there's elements like talking snakes, etc., that we're just like, nah. However, that doesn't mean it's useless to us. There's still a lot we can gain from the story. It teaches us, that humans are made in God's image. It teaches us that we have the tendency to sin and mess things up. You can still get a lot of meaning from stories without having to take them hyper literally, if that makes any sense.
And speaking of stories, tell us more about your latest book.
So I did my final dissertation on everything we've been talking about on autism in the church, and I wanted to make it more readable because, well, academia, only like 5 people read it if you publish something academically. So working with a very nice person who also used to go to the same university as me and was then publishing books, he offered to help me turn it into a proper book. So we now have With All Your Mind, Autism and the Church, it's a very short book on purpose because I wanted it to be accessible and not too wordy. And it condenses all my research. It talks about, the studies, autism and religion, and it also looks into what the church does well, what they can do better, and it includes stories from other people. So it's not just me banging on, there's other people talking about their experiences. And yeah, so far it's been well received across a wide variety of traditions. So it's not just, my Protestant tradition. Like I've got Catholic friends who have read it and found it useful. So it's been a fun experience.
Where can people find the book and where can they find you, like on social media, if you're on social media? Or
so on Facebook, I'm Erin Burnett, author. I always have to add the author in because there's a CNN newsreader with the same name, which is really annoying when it comes to marketing. My website is erinburnettauthor.co.uk. And on that website, there's links to where you can buy my books. I have a blog and yeah.
Cool. I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions now. So basically, you tell me first answer that comes to your mind. No overthinking. I know it's hard, but we can do this. What is your favorite music or band? Type of music?
Have you heard of Snow Patrol?
Yes.
Of
Yes.
course, interest.
I don't know if they're even a thing in America, but they're a Northern Irish band who have ended up being quite famous. I do like them.
I like a lot of alt rock. Eileen doesn't do anything cool at all. She's still never seen Star Wars, so I wouldn't expect her to know cool alt rock bands. So,
What is your favorite drink?
Diet Coke. Love Diet Coke.
yes, it's the best.
What's your favorite fictional portrayal of autism in the media?
Oh. Have you heard of the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime?
Yes.
Yeah.
Damn, Andrew. What is it?
It's it's both a British book and it's been made into a play. The play is gorgeous, but it's all about an autistic boy who's trying to solve the mystery of who killed his neighbor's dog. But it's a really sensitive portrayal, I think, and I really enjoyed it.
What was your dream job as a child, and what did you want to be?
I went through so many different things. I think the earliest thing I ever wanted to be was a vet, as I think a lot of people do, because animals are cute.
I agree. Okay, this one is a very important question. Is glow in the dark a color, a property, or both?
The property, surely.
So when you see that like yellow color of glow in the dark with the lights on,
Yeah, the color's still yellow.
but it's specifically, you're like, that's glow in the dark. No, only
Neon.
a property. Yeah, but what color is it? It's a color. You see that? What other color would you call it?
Neon. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, though. We should always ask it, and then
The big issues.
Can we do that? Yeah, Eileen, let's start it. Okay. We're going with the first one ever. We're starting it. We're going with we'll do it with, we always end with this question. That would make me so happy. We need to do this.
We'll
only a property. Yeah, only a property. Okay. Thank you. So
take notes.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you. We never talked about this subject, so it's really interesting.
So yeah, no, this was a great conversation. It's not something, like I said, that we haven't really interviewed someone for, and it's an important topic. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for staying late.
Yeah,
No worries.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.